Delta connection flight traveling from Minneapolis to Toronto overturned on the runway while landing and caught fucking fire. And boom, we're live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast. I am your host, Stefano. And guys, we got a good conversation for you guys today. We got a good episode for you guys today. There's so much happening. I had to jump on camera here and do a solo episode because there's so much to talk about in the world of politics, in Canada, in the United States. There are so many interesting things that we have to discuss, and some very alarming things, some worrisome things, but some pretty interesting perspectives here that we're going to discuss. I got a solo episode for you guys today. I got my buddy Dean, who's with me as well.
What's up?
Dean the Machine. We're going to kind of go back and forth on some interesting things. But guys, without further ado, let's talk about some of these things here because from a Canadian, there's some concerns that are going on right now. I know a lot of Canadians tuning in can agree. There's a lot of concerns that we have here in Canada in the world of politics, whether it's to do with your wallet, whether it's to do with your safety, or whether it's to do with your future. So we're going to talk about some of those things today. We're going to talk about the many things that we have to discuss. The news cycles are moving fast. A lot is happening with Canada and the U.S. in particular, which we're going to talk about that. There's a growing animosity between the Canada and the United States. Dean, have you seen this animosity that seems to be growing between us and our neighbors?
Yeah, the 51st state stuff is really kind of starting to get annoying.
Yes, it's getting annoying. I think Canadians are getting pissed, and we're going to talk about some of those things in the U.S. We're going to talk about some things happening in the United States. Elon Musk is generating more liberal outrage than Trump these days. It's just, at first he was a guy sending rockets to space, and now he's a guy sending rockets to space, but also getting yelled at and screamed at by every major news outlet that there is. You seen that, Dean? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's hilarious how quickly people forget that he was the golden boy of the left. Electric cars, environment, that. And I mean, it just shows you it's all, the support is usually surface deep. So
yeah, exactly. Which we'll dive deep into that, guys, the Elon Musk thing, and more in particular with DOGE, with USAID, and all the corruption that we see with the overspending, the waste, fraud, and abuse. But with Canada, we had our first plane crash in Toronto Pearson this past week, a little over a week or so, and the first time, I think I read somewhere like 2005 was the last thing even remotely close to what has happened. What are your just first quick reactions to that?
I mean, yeah, nobody wants to hear about planes crashing and stuff. Obviously, the people on board, and you got to think about the next time you're flying. It seems like it's a real big issue here. It's not just the one weird crash that happened at Pearson. It's like happening almost every other day. I see a new article about another plane that hit something or flew into a helicopter or something.
Like why? And that's what we're going to kind of open with when we kind of get into the conversation here, guys. We're going to talk about this alarming trend that we're seeing. But Toronto hasn't seen something like this in a long time. So this is very, very interesting. We'll discuss some of the reasons on maybe why it happened and what's going on there. But more interesting, we're going to get the political perspectives because the Democrats have a position, the Liberals have their position, the Liberals and Democrats, and then the Conservatives and Republicans have their position as to why these planes are crashing and to maybe what is going on there. So we'll see what they have to say about it and how it relates to politics. And in Canada, lastly, we're also patiently waiting for another federal elections. We're just kind of held up here in Canada while the Liberals sort out their shit and figure out who their next leader is. So we're going to talk Mark Carney, who seems to be the front leader there. We're going to talk about some interesting polling there and the possible incoming election and what the sort of polls are saying. Because there's some interesting polls, Dean. I don't know if you've seen them, and there's some alarming polls, but we'll kind of get into maybe what's happening there. But we're going to talk about all that plus the obvious, like we opened the conversation here with the obvious concern of the feud that we're having between the United States and America. They're literally booing the national anthem, Canadians. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Let's start with the plane crash in Toronto. What was your first reaction, Dean, when you first saw that? Like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, exactly. What the hell happened? It's upside down. You know, like my first reaction before I heard anything of how it happened, it was bizarre. I was like, this plane's upside down. It crashed at Pearson. It's pretty crazy. It's a pretty big airport, but I mean, it's a small airport in terms of the planet.
Never happens. Like, it's worth mentioning that it was a terrible weather, which we'll talk about some of the in particulars. But just to give you guys the details for maybe some who don't know, on February 17th, a Delta connecting flight operated by Endeavor Air. That was the connecting flight. I'm sure you know some of the things. We'll open up the conversation for that. The Delta connection flight traveling from Minneapolis to Toronto overturned on the runway while landing and caught fucking fire, which is insane. Can you imagine that? You're in a plane, everything's going good, you're fine. Then, when it's landing, which is apparently one of the most dangerous parts of the flight.
Landing and takeoff is the most
Landing and takeoff is the most... So, you're landing, and then the freaking thing hits too hard. Some people are saying pilot error. Some people are saying some other things, which we'll talk about. But all 80 passengers thankfully survived. 21 injuries. I think there was a young child included in that, which is wild. Mm-hmm. The preliminary investigations suggest that challenging weather conditions may have contributed to the incident, while others, argue that it's probably many other things too, which we'll discuss. The last time there was an incident even remotely close to this was in 2005. Was even the closest that anything has ever happened.
20
to this.
years.
Over 20 years, and it wasn't even close to this. I think they skidded off and went into not even to flip and cause fire. Yeah. No chance. Since the crash, Delta has offered each person $30,000 in compensation. Do you think that's enough, Dean?
No. As soon as I saw that, I started laughing. $30,000 US is what, $50K Canadian? It's a joke. Like I would want $3 million, like not $30K.
Yeah, $30,000. I don't know. You tell us in the comments, guys. What is $30,000 enough for you to go through possibly the most traumatic experience in your whole entire life? I don't know. Like for the plane to come crashing down, hit the deck too hard, and flip over. $30,000 is probably not enough, man. That is not sufficient for that experience. But what do you think their approach is with that? You think they're just like, let's silence these guys with the cash?
I think they came out afterwards and said, who knows what they said to the actual people in the offer, but afterwards a spokesperson for Delta came out and said, there's no strings attached. Like, we're not asking for you to be quiet about it. This is not like a hush payment. What it is I think it's a lot of money to a lot of people. Obviously, $50,000, $30,000 US is a lot of money to a lot of people. They might just take that and just avoid the headache. However, if there's any wrongdoing that any of the lawyers find, because some people are filing cases now, if they find any wrongdoing, they're fucked. So this might have been just like a way, like, okay, it's probably like what, 30,000 times 80 people. I don't know what the math is on that, but it's like maybe 1.5 million, something like that. Keep them quiet. They know that potentially each of these passengers could be awarded millions of dollars each. So I think it's a way for them to kind of hush people up without actually telling them to.
Yeah, 30,000 times 81 is, it's about, almost 2.5 million, I guess.
2.5, okay.
It's like...
So still, it's peanuts for them. They make that every other couple hours. They make a couple $1 million in profit, right? So for them, it's peanuts, but they think it's going to be enough to probably keep people from suing and looking into the situation too much. That's not going to happen. People are going to sue. They already are, and I think they're going to find some wrongdoing and some issues.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the increase in spike in crashes, but guys, it's alarming, especially when you see this in Canada and the United States. Why are there so many aviation errors? What is going on in Canada? What is going on in the United States? Why do we seem to have these problems? What has caused these problems? Because anytime there's a problem, that there is likely a reason why that problem is occurring, and there's hopefully likely a solution. Now, since the crash, as this times that this podcast is being recorded, the official reporting hasn't been out yet, but which we discussed yesterday, Dean, when I sent you those updated information, an unverified report. That's I searched online to see what exactly the reporting was, to see who the pilots were, right? That's some of the information you want to see, is who's responsible for this error. Yep. And it seems that the pilot has been identified as Kendall Swanson, identified as the alleged pilot of Delta flight that crashed upside down in Toronto. Now, that's an unverified report, but that seems to be the latest of the news. Now, the other alarming part is there's a screenshot that surfaced online. Now, guys, take this with a grain of salt. I don't know if it's 100% true, but what else I've read online and what I've found through a little bit of investigating is that this individual, this lady that was driving and steering the plane, the head pilot of the flight, she got her issued her official transport pilot license on January 9th of 2025. So that was literally about a month ago.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting that of that information there, if that's correct. Now that's going to lead to what we're going to talk about with some of the alarms on how this relates to politics, which that's what we'll kind of get into shortly. But let's talk about the spikes in plane crashes, because like we were just saying, there's been so many. There's been a concerning trend developing across the U.S. The first 7 weeks of 2025, I found this information, there has been at least 7 plane crashes in the United States alone. For some examples, we have the mid-air collision in Arizona on January 29th, which resulted in 67 fatalities. That one was pretty intense. Everyone saw that. There was like 2 planes that collided. On February 6th, there was an accident in Alaska with 10 fatalities. And then, of course, on February 17th with Toronto. That's just to list a few. 7 in 7 weeks. That's hell of an average, Dean. That's how much we found.
You missed the, I don't know. That was in Washington, the one where the plane flew into the Black Hawk helicopter. Remember
There's that one too. The one with the helicopter.
Maybe it wasn't that recent, but that's pretty recent in my mind.
That was this year.
That was this year.
It was 2025.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one, actually, if you think about it, just unpacking it now quickly here.
Yeah.
That Black Hawk helicopter is a part of the federal government, is it not?
Yeah, they were running drills for evacuations in Washington, so probably some kind of Secret Service drills or something like that, but it was a military aircraft. I mean, it's just complete incompetence. There's no conspiracy. It's just complete incompetence in the air traffic control. I heard on that one, there was only 2 people responsible at the time of the crash for air traffic control, and one of them had been sent home early 2 hours prior to the crash or something like that. And the person who was sent home early was in charge of helicopter traffic. So they sent home the person who was in charge of helicopter traffic and said, hey, you can handle everything. We're going to send this person home. What the reason is, I don't recall if they even released a reason, but it wasn't due to illness or anything like that. It was just, let's send this guy home early, and then, yeah.
See, when you think about these things after they happen, you go what the hell? Why did it go wrong? Because there's people that died.
Yeah.
There's alarming stats that are coming out, and one of the other things that happens when a travesty happens, especially now across the West, is it's always politicized. On both sides of the aisle, you got to call it the way it is. It always was politicized, but somewhere in the middle of the both sides of the aisle, there is probably something close to the truth. So let's discuss some of those things. Conservatives and Republicans say that these issues are a result of DEI programs through the Biden administration and previous hiring based on equity and not competence. What are your initial thoughts of that, Dean?
I think, yeah, probably. I think it's probably a large factor. Some of the things, are probably acts of God, uncontrollable, whatever, but it doesn't help when you have somebody with 1 month of experience flying a fucking plane because they're a woman. And now Endeavor Air, I don't know if you said any of this, but Endeavor Air, one of their key things is what they call unmanned flights.
Yes.
Which is insane. So unmanned flight is typically no pilot, like a drone, but what they're referring to is unmanned as in there are no males on the plane, on the crew.
I didn't realize that it was related to drone flying.
Well, no. Well, normally what you would call a drone is an unmanned aircraft.
Right.
There's no person in it.
Right.
Man with a capital M, as in mankind.
Yes.
What they're just doing a play on words and calling it unmanned aircraft because there's no actual men with penises in the aircraft. There's just women flying the airplane.
And thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point, because I did see a lot of material about that. Endeavor Air, I think they're a connecting flight organization for Delta that works with Delta.
Yeah, it's kind of like, when you fly Air Canada, it'll say Rouge by Air Canada.
Yes, exactly.
It's like one of their
similar thing.
Yeah, they basically throw Delta on there to make you trust the airline more and use their reputation.
And and to your point, one of their main marketing ideologies, their practices, is enforcement of DEI. Yeah. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. So just so you guys know, this is to the conservatives' point, to the Republicans' point, this is happening in major organizations where entities and companies are hiring predicated off of identity and not competence. They're hiring based on what the person identifies as, not how skilled they are. Now, why would we want our pilots, our doctors, these types of individuals that we need to rely on as a society to be hired not on merit but hired on identity? I don't agree with that. Now, especially on a situation like this, this company here is very, very vocal. You can go and look at their TikTok. You can go and look at their company sites. There's extensive amount of promo on their practices of DEI. And like you were saying, Dean, one of their main practices is their celebration of unmanned flights. So they have these caucuses. What would you call it? A flight caucus, like this plane just full of
the crew. Yeah, the crew, the stewardesses, all of the crew is female. That's their goal. All pilots, everything. Yeah,
and they're doing that as an act of conscious effort. It's not as a consequence of the selection was just happened to be female. This is a conscious effort that we're going to instrument this constructive, collaborative effort to ensure that everybody on the flight here is a female. Now, I don't know if that is necessarily the best way forward, but I'll leave it to you guys. That's what these conversations are for. You guys decide, because there's some alarming statistics coming out, and the Republicans and Conservatives definitely believe that the spike of incidences are a result of the negative side of DEI. Now, let's talk about the Liberal and Democrats and some of their positions. They believe, Dean, that this is a consequence of Trump and how he has fired an extensive amount of FAA agents, and they have really cleaned house from a federal standpoint. Now, what are your thoughts on their perspective?
None of that has happened when these crashes were taking place. So it's not like he wiped out half the FAA, and that's why they only had 2 people in Washington watching that airport. That was not the reason. He didn't fire a bunch of men so that now Endeavor Air can only hire women. That's not what's happening here. Of course, one side's going to blame the other, but we just had 8 years 4 years of Biden's administration. And anybody who's been on this planet for the last 4 years can tell you that was the narrative. You got to support DEI. You got to make sure everybody's included. Not necessarily. It's equality, not equity, right? Like they want to make sure that everybody.
It's equity.
Equity,
not equality. The difference there is the equity is the equality of outcomes. So they do what they can to establish a fair outcome, which is never going to be achievable because there's so many outcomes that you can try to achieve. It's an unpractical stance.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that it's just an industry like anything else. The DEI industry created new jobs, new need for HR, and all of that shit. The money from that is pushing a lot of the laws and the kind of, not necessarily laws, but all the practices that these companies are doing. They're sort of getting bullied into doing shit like this. And they're not, they're worried about their bottom line. They're like, well, if we don't do something like this, are we going to lose shareholder value because people don't want to support us anymore? Right. So let's just fucking do it and we'll see what happens. And it's obviously in this scenario in the airline industry, it's resulted in a disaster apparently.
Exactly. And Dean, isn't there an organization that rates you based off of your DEI or your inclusive hiring practices?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
I fucking forget the name, and it'd be so useful to know that right now.
Yeah,
but yeah, there is. They give you a grading system based on how progressive you are.
DEI. I'm just going to look it up.
Yeah, look it up while you talk. But just to stay on the point of politicizing, you look at even catastrophes that happen in Florida, that happen abroad. They're always politicized. There was a recent catastrophe that happened. And I'm forgetting the what catastrophe it was. The LA fires. The LA fires were seriously politicized.
Same thing,
right? But the thing was that was a consequence of incompetence. That was the position, right? There's not enough fire hydrants. There's not enough water supply. There's not enough, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a result of politics. And the liberals are giving critique to the Republicans. Or why are you politicizing this travesty? Well, when something happens in Florida with Ron DeSantis, you best believe that it's politicized.
Yeah, of course.
With the natural disasters that happen in Florida. So there's just so much concern when it comes to politicizing these things because at the end of the day, there's lives lost.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's a real thing. Did you find?
No, I didn't find it. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, there's a grading system that they essentially grade you based on how progressive you are. But that's not the way we should be grading our companies and entities, especially ones that should be predicated off competence, not identity. Now, we talked about the previous administration. We talked about Biden and his role with DEI and these progressive efforts. And we might be, like you said, seeing the result of that. But let's talk about, so people have an idea of exactly some examples of DEI and these efforts that Biden had put into place when he was in office. Because politics matters, guys. And this is maybe what we're seeing. So let's talk about Biden's role in DEI. He signed an executive order 13985 on January 2021. This order is titled Advancing racial equity and support for undeserved communities through the federal government. That's what it was called. This EO is aimed at removing barriers for unrepresented groups in the eyes of the Democrats. It calls for the creation of an equity team within agencies to address these disparities. So these are examples of exact efforts that Biden put into place to ensure that the equality of outcome was achieved through as much as that could. Let's give you another example. Executive Order 14035. This was signed on June 2021. Another DEI effort. This one was entitled Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility in the Federal Workforce. Very interesting one there. This order emphasizes the need for a diverse, inclusive, and equitable federal workforce. It encourages agencies to build workforce strategies to recruit, retain, and promote equity hiring. That is exactly what they achieved with these efforts. That is exactly what they set out to achieve with these efforts, and we're possibly seeing the result of that. You got something for us, Dean?
I'm just letting ChatGPT spit me some answer here, but there's none of them that I recognize that I was thinking of here. So there's the CEI, which is the Corporate Equity Index.
Right, I saw that one.
Yeah, and then there's Fair 360, which is just a couple different companies here. I thought there was one big one that I was thinking of. I can't remember the name, though. But yeah, Bloomberg Gender Equity Index. Like, there's a lot of companies who are probably, figuring out these kind of programs that different companies are having and grading them and scoring them. But there's one that I was thinking of that I can't remember right now.
Yeah, there was a lot. That's just some to list a few guys. Like Biden and his administration with the Democrats, the do-nothing Democrats that absolutely destroyed the United States, and the Liberals are doing the same here in Canada, which we'll talk more about. But they signed a lot of these efforts into practice, and Trump came in and really had to do what he can to start reversing them. I think he owns the record for the most EOs, executive orders, starting out of any presidency.
Yeah, he's been ripping them like daily.
He's just ripping them like crazy, which they are freaking out about, which we're going to talk about. But the Biden administration aimed to employ DEI into the federal government by expanding federal contracts for minority-owned businesses only, requiring agencies to implement diversity-focused hiring and training, and reversed some of Trump's restrictions and pullbacks on DEI programs. For example, Trump got rid of critical race theory, just to list one. So we're seeing sort of the polar opposite now. So I guess as time goes, we'll see which one works better. But let's talk about some other interesting things here, because one of the things that is also causing cause for concern, just before we tie a bow on everything with the plane crashes. And is there anything else, Dean, that you worth mentioning that you maybe want to talk about these spike in plane crashes and these concerns, or DEI?
Yeah, I think to me it's the only obvious answer. This is kind of like the comeuppance, you know what I mean? Like, these are the oats you sow. You want to slowly degrade the people that you are hiring in favor of including more people that maybe don't deserve it compared to somebody else in terms of skill.
Right.
This is what you get, So it's not just the airlines. I'm sure you've seen it tons of other places, different businesses that we all interact with. They're slowly getting worse and shittier, and this is probably a lot to do with it. So.
And frankly, I think that people are sort of scared now with what's going on, and it possibly could have contributed to the absolute mandate that Trump got elected on.
Yeah.
Is these sorts of efforts, and people are realizing that this is not exactly the most practical, reasonable, and smartest way forward.
Yeah.
So,
well, both countries are going to shit. Canada and the U.S. are both going downhill. For our country for the last 10 years, but their country, especially in the last 4 years, have really gone downhill. So people are fed up with it. When you can't afford things, like when it really hits you home, all of a sudden you don't really care what kind of genitals somebody who's trying to operate in the next swim competition has. Like, that shit is not important. Let's get somebody in here who's going to fix everything, because I can't get a job and I can't afford eggs. So
yeah, the eggs is a big one. That's a big one. The price of eggs is going up, guys. I don't know if you guys knew that, but yeah, the groceries are one of the. We have seen such a shift in a negative way over the past several years in Canada and the United States, and it is as a consequence. We do believe that it is as a consequence of politics, because politics matters. That's why voting matters, because these things have consequences, especially as time compounds together. We see the result of some of these policies. Communism doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. These efforts don't work. I believe that possibly the free market is the most compelling way to operate a successful society and opening up the level playing field for equality of opportunity, you know, versus equality of outcome.
That's what you got to focus on. Improve the shitty areas of the country, improve the people who aren't making enough money, lift it up from the bottom, and then, you know, it'll come out at the top.
Yeah, because how many success stories do we know of people that were risen from poverty?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
These things happen, and it can happen. The Democrats tell you a different story, that if you're in a certain position or you look a certain way, you will not succeed because of this, that, and the third. Not necessarily think it's the best way forward. But let's talk about some of the things that have absolutely frustrated the Democrats and liberals and have caused a lot of concern. And we're going to talk about some interesting perspectives here. But under Trump's leadership, he has built an initiative to tackle these types of efforts in a strong, competent workforce government that hires off of merit, not identity. This is discussing a little bit further about DEI. Trump has tried to employ things polar opposite to what Biden and the Democrats have tried to institute in their government. In addition to this, Trump has also established efforts to clean up and identify fraud, waste, and abuse in the government. This is seen particularly with DOGE, DOGE, which stands for the Department of Government Efficiency, which is speared and led by none other than Elon Musk. So DOGE has generated so much fury, so much frustration on the left. Some say it's because they're officially draining the swamp, and the waste, fraud, and abuse is being exposed, and Democrats and liberals are at the forefront of it. And others say that this is unfair and it's not exactly what should be happening. Elon's not an elected official, and we'll discuss some of the causes for concern there. Just initial thoughts, Dean. What's your thoughts on DOGE?
I wish he would do it in Canada.
I know.
Too.
I wish it would happen in Canada.
There's no way that anybody should be against what he's doing if you're an honest person. And if you are against it, it's probably because you're willfully ignorant or you're complicit in what he's trying to stop happen. So either you're a politician who's on the take and is really worried about what's going to happen now, or you're somebody who is just nearly not paying attention at all, because there's nothing more wasteful than what the governments have been doing for the last 100 fucking years. They've been stealing money out of taxpayers' money year after year.
That is exactly the point, guys. You guys got to understand, this is your tax-paying money. We go to work, you spend money into this society, you contribute to society in a positive way, and the government is taking that money that you go to work for, and they are spending it in negligent ways. Why would you support that? That is exactly the purpose of DOGE. That is exactly what it is there for. It's for the efficiency of government spending. Why wouldn't we have that in Canada? Why would you want to know why? Because the government in Canada taxes you more than anybody else. And most Canadians, they go to work, Dean, most Canadians, they go to work for free half the year.
Yeah.
The government taxes us so much that by the time you get that dollar, it is cut and split up so many different times that if you add it up, you're working in a year, half the year for free.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Dean?
I mean, everybody's tired of the taxes in Canada. It's literally insane. The capital gains tax increase was recently proposed. I don't think it actually is going to happen, but it was just the last straw. You get taxed when you buy anything at 13%, crazy. You get taxed, the income tax here is crazy. The corporate tax here is crazy. The capital gains tax here is crazy.
Yeah.
Most of these taxes are double what it is in the United States. And it would be great if everything here was sunshine and lollipops, but the country's falling apart. We got no infrastructure left. We have way too much immigration for what we can support.
Yeah.
The whole country's just in a shambles right now.
Yeah, we're going to talk specifically about some of the things that Canada taxes us on, but let's stay on DOGE, Elon Musk, and USAID, because that's another thing that we have to discuss here, guys, because the overspending, which you know better than anybody, Dean, we were talking about this before the podcast, a lot of it's coming from USAID, and we're going to discuss some of the interesting things that they were a part of, which you guys are going to find very interesting on some of the contributions that USAID was a part of. Very, very interesting ones. But DOGE was established by Trump on January 20th, 2025, and its aim was to modernize federal technology and maximize government efficiency. He appointed Elon Musk to lead the charge with this directive. Democrats criticize this because they cite that any appointee by the president must go through a vetting and voting system. In addition, they argue that Elon is not an elected official, and there is concern that Elon has too much access to private information that he shouldn't.
It's absolutely insane. Like, the guy is he's got hundreds of billions of dollars. What do you think he's doing with this information? He's not like sitting there trying to figure out how to scam people out of $500 on their credit cards or whatever, or steal their social insurance number. He's really, if you just look at what he's done with Twitter, I know a lot of people hate Twitter, especially if you hate the right. But what he did with Twitter is cut, I think, 80% of the employees.
Yeah.
And the thing has never been more popular. The app has never been more popular. So somehow the traffic is up and their employee base is down.
Is there data on that? Like on X and the success post Elon Musk?
I just read something about it, how I think he has just turned it into being profitable or something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Because at a certain point it wasn't.
Because I was reading that because it was in an article. It was more focused on Tesla, because the shareholders of Tesla can have like a sigh of relief now that Twitter is no longer a drain on him and it's becoming profitable. So he's turned that into a company that was completely wasteful. It cut 80% of the workforce, and it still survived. And not only did it survive, it's better than ever.
Yeah.
So I think if he can do that with the U.S. government, I don't know anybody that should be against that. Even people who don't live in the U.S., you should be for that, because your country can follow suit.
Yes, and he's applying some of those same methods, that he did with X to the government, and he who's better to do something like that than him? He's the richest man in the world, yes, because that's a consequence of capitalism and the free market. He's an innovator. He's an inventor. He's an unbelievably intelligent individual that is sending rockets to space, and then they're coming back. He is innovating in many different ways, in a progressive way too, which seems like a bit of a conundrum, where liberals and Democrats have a very progressive stance on many things, especially when it comes to the climate. And here is Elon Musk, who's creating one of the most successful and efficient, energy efficient motor vehicles. And
he's the only reason there's electric cars on the planet.
Exactly.
Right now.
Nobody's done it successfully except for him.
Well, even if they like now, there's a ton of them from Porsche and Mercedes, but those companies were not going to make electric cars unless the Tesla was a threat, and he knew that. That's why he also open sourced a lot of the patents for Tesla. He did not try to make Tesla to become a billionaire off of the backs of electric cars. He created Tesla because he realized, holy shit, we're going to run out of oil one day, number one, and it's not good for us. So I better make some electric cars here that kick ass and they're not lame, because that'll become competition and a threat to Mercedes, Porsche, Honda, all these other companies that most people have in their driveway. They're going to need to make electric cars. And you know what? I'm going to make it easy for them. I'm going to show them all the work that we did. They can use it. They can borrow it. They can innovate on it.
Interesting.
And that's it. So he didn't try to do that for a capitalistic reason. And that's why I believe he's not doing this for a capitalistic reason either.
I think he's motivated, possibly in a personal way. There were some interesting things with his kids and stuff like that, there were possibly some personal motivation there. But
the future of the country, his kids live in that country. He said in an interview with Hannity and Trump, I don't know if you saw that, but he basically said, I don't understand why every billionaire who has a business in the U.S. isn't concerned as concerned as I am. Guess what happens if the United States sinks as a ship? You go down too. You're not going to be okay if the United States fails.
Yeah, and the Democrats, liberals, and all the media pundits, they hate him now. Yeah. And there's a real media effort right now in the news cycle to demonize Elon Musk. They're doing anything to try to demonize him. They're trying to split Trump and Elon apart, which I hope that ego, because they're both hyper successful men, and I think if anybody's going to probably lead that disconnect, it might be Trump based off of his ego. And I think they're smart.
They know. He knows. They asked him that question. He said, they're trying to break you.
Exactly.
Says, I know. I see it all the time.
Yeah,
he knows.
which I would like to think my vote of confidence is on the side of that they're going to continue their relationship in a collaborative way. And I think Elon respects him as the leader, because that's exactly what he is.
Yeah.
And Elon's a leader in his own respect, because he's leading the charge on this government efficiency, which we're seeing some interesting numbers come out on overspending, waste, fraud, and abuse, and I'm going to discuss some of them right now. Let's talk about some DOGE identifiers. The misuse of government-issued credit cards. That was one thing that was identified. DOGE uncovered nearly $40 billion in spending through government-issued credit cards in a fiscal year of 2024. In the fiscal year of 2024, they discovered $40 billion. Can you imagine that? Involving approximately 4.6 million active accounts and 90 million transactions with little to no tracking of spending. Can you imagine that, guys? That's for the Americans listening, that's your tax-paying dollars. You go to work so that $40 billion can be just where did it go? I don't know. It's gone. I don't know. It's unbelievable. Let's go to another point. Untracked treasury payments. An investigation revealed by DOGE 4.7 trillion in treasury were missing the Treasury account symbol, a critical tracking code, was missing. The absence of this code made it nearly impossible to trace, which highlighted the significant gaps in the financial accountability. So money is being spent and nobody knows where it's going. Yeah. How is that possible? Trillions of dollars, billions of dollars, and this is all being exposed through DOGE. Let's talk about one more. Excessive federal contracts and leases. So these are federal contracts established by the federal government. DOGE reported $8.5 billion in savings by canceling 1,100 contracts and 100 leases. Despite these efforts, the amount only represents a fraction of the annual government contract spending, which is around $759 billion. Dean, what are your thoughts on those three right there? How crazy is some of those numbers?
Yeah, it's insane. I think it's like any big corporation, the company, the business, or the country is being run like a big business. When it's not your business, and it's not your money, it's really easy to waste it. You know what I mean? And the money just keeps coming. So if you want to put something on the company card being one of the agency credit cards, who gives a shit? It's not our money. It's not my boss's money. Nobody's checking with my boss.
Nobody's checking it? What?
Like they're leaving out the identifier codes probably because they're spending money on shit that they shouldn't be spending money on, and then they would know that would be a problem if anybody followed up on this.
Which we're going to talk about more of that. Now let's talk about some of the nonsensical spending because, guys, there's more. $20 million, guys. $20 million for Sesame Street in Pakistan, funding 130 episodes of a localized Sesame Street to educate children, aka indoctrinate children. Who knows what they were doing over there?
Yeah, it's a psyop for sure.
Yes, for sure. $20 million. Are you kidding me? Let's go to another one here. $23 million in energy-efficient pumps in Pakistan, aiming to replace inefficient, irregulatory pumps and they drastically fell short of those goals. I think Rogan talked about this one. They fell like extremely short of those goals, and all of those millions of dollars just basically went to waste. Let's discuss the next one here. $15 million specifically. Now, this is probably one of the best one, guys. Very interesting one that affected all your lives. $15 million specifically went to the Wuhan Institute, okay, funding the gain of function research, which we all know now was a part of the catastrophe that we know as today as COVID, okay? Schools have also spent nearly $200 billion in COVID relief funds with little to no oversight. And lastly, USAID sponsored state-funded sponsorship programs regarding COVID, and they censored everybody during COVID. So that was state-funded. So not only did USAID contribute and fund the gain-of-function research that happened in Wuhan that ultimately resulted in COVID, they also funded the consequences of that, which was people discussing the alternatives, the opposition. They funded the censorship of those positions. Which ended up being all wrong, The lab leak theory, the natural immunity being very beneficial and useful theory, the vaccine stop transmission, that was all ended up being not true, which they censored this stuff, the death rate, and this was all confirmed by the CIA and the House Oversight Committee. We all know not to be true. Dean, what the hell was going on with that stuff? What do you think?
I mean, me and you knew that from the beginning that this was all a scam here. But I mean, yeah, some of these things, it's just hilarious thinking that, like, I remember people, you couldn't even say the word COVID on YouTube. You had to like make a word out, schmovid, whatever.
Yeah, remember?
Yeah, it was insane. And the amount of censorship that surrounded that kind of completely, like, I don't want to say radicalized me, but definitely turned my head on right in terms of like, oh, like you can't trust anything these people are doing.
And I think a lot of people following COVID, which we see it now, a lot of people, there's a lot of reluctancy to get vaccinated just on a grand scale now, especially with children, because there's a lack of faith in the Institute, and I think rightfully so, because what we've seen through COVID was possibly in my lifetime, maybe in our lifetime, the biggest demonstration of government overreach in recent history. It was unbelievable. They lied about everything, and now, present day, there's no accountability. Nobody's... Fauci was literally pardoned at 11 p.m. So you imagine, Biden is leaving office the next day, right? At 11 p.m., there was a preemptive pardon issued by the Democrats, and Biden specifically, the night before he left presidency as the president of the United States. That's just whatever. There's not a big deal. Guys, what has happened through COVID? What they did to small businesses, what they did to our countries, what they did in separating our families. It was insane. And all that was funded by USAID. So shout out to DOGE, because at the end of the day, the government efficiency is surfacing some interesting perspectives, is surfacing some interesting insight on what is happening behind the scenes. And hopefully Canadians are listening, because we need the same thing here in Canada, because we need efficiency in our government, and the government overspending and the waste, fraud, and abuse is extensive, and it needs to end. But when I read that USAID was the one that funded the gain of function research, which Fauci, by the way, lied on trial, that he had no idea about gain of function research, which now it's confirmed by the CIA and the House Oversight Committee that it exactly was true. It's reprehensible. It's just
completely
reprehensible.
insane. Yeah,
completely insane. But there's more to this, guys. There's more. In other nonsensical spending, $1.5 million to DEI initiatives abroad. Let's talk a little bit. That was something we were just talking a little bit about. $68 million was contributed to the WEF. A lot of you know about the WEF with Klaus Schwab, that very, very odd, interesting leader of the WEF. There was $68 million from USAID that was dedicated to that organization, that globalist organization that is just absolutely loved by these establishment politicians, liberals and conservatives, some of them. But we're not interested in the WEF. We're interested in sovereignty and the individual thought of individuals and the sovereignty of nations.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
Own nothing and you will be happy while it's happening. We will own your life. All this information can be found on the doge.gov website. So yes, Dean, I don't know if have you peeked at that website?
I haven't yet, no, but I heard him say that they're going to be transparent about everything and put it all up on the website.
Guys, I'm telling you, if you have X, follow Doge on X. They post all the government identifiers of where this overspending was coming from, and they have a website where they keep in touch with, and they show transparency rather of everything that they're uncovering. So it's just appalling where some of the tax dollars are going to, and it needs to come to an end, which I think that's exactly what's going to be happening here. Now let's talk a little bit about Canada and the United States. Speaking of the U.S., so much frustrations happening there, and Canada sharing some of those frustrations. But not only are we sharing frustrations with these situations that are happening, we're also sharing some frustrations with each other. Canada and U.S. seems to be having a growing animosity that seems to be happening, and there's some interesting takes and perspectives. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about Canada and the U.S. Since the tariffs threats by Trump and the 51 first state assertions that he's been saying, feuds have been growing between the countries of Canada and the United States. We are seeing booing at hockey games, and Canadian politicians are using the Trump tariffs as a vehicle to instill fear in the Canadian voter with claims that Pierre Poilievre will sell out Canada to the United States. So guys, let's first talk about the booing at the hockey games, because this is absolutely reprehensible. We're seeing recently the Four Nations Cup, where Canada has successfully won. Yes, it is our game. You can thank us later, but Canada seems to be the kings of hockey, as per usual. The United States got the better of Canada at one point, and there was a lot of chirping online. So it's good to get some of that back now. Canada is the king of the rink, and that's just the way she goes sometimes, unfortunately. But Canadians shouldn't be upset with Trump booing the American national anthem at these hockey games. You shouldn't be upset with Trump that much. You know who you should be upset with? Is the Liberal government. Because you know what, guys? Trump campaigned he would do exactly what it is that he's doing. He's putting America first, which it fucking sucks if he puts tariffs, 25% tariffs on Canada. Don't get me wrong. It's insane, and it would absolutely devastate our economy. So in no way, shape, or form am I defending that, or I'm proud or happy of that. That is insane, and I hope that a solution is found. The fucking part that frustrates me, guys, is Trump always said he would do this. And what frustrates me is that our Canadian government is still prorogued right now when there is these threats and these concerns happening, and we want an election. Canadian citizens want an election, but you know who's holding up you going to the voter box? It's Liberals and Trudeau. That's who. We have to wait until March 9th or further. I don't even remember the date, to be honest. We have to wait until sometime in March for us to even have an idea of when we're going to get back to these polls. There's major issues happening in Canada right now, and we're prorogued while the Liberals sort out their shit and figure out who their next leader is going to be. Now, is that fair for the tax-paying Canadian? Is that fair for Canadians who are waiting to see what is happening with our country? We waited 9 years with these Liberals in Trudeau, and they've now surfaced some new exciting polls on their front. But what I don't like, guys, and I want to talk about this for 1 second, is the booing of the national anthem at these games. Guys, there is nothing that we are going to achieve from booing the American national anthem. First of all, a lot of American soldiers died for their flag, for their country. So you have to respect the anthem. I think there's chirping to a certain extent where you can fucking give the beaks, you can chirp the other country, you know, you guys are shit at this, we're better at hockey, whatever. But to disrespect the flag or the anthem, I don't agree. Now, our anthem used to be even better before the Liberals came in and changed all thy son's command and freaking ruined it. But it's still something we're very proud of, Canadians, which you should have a lot of pride of your country. And you should stand strong and stand respectable when your nation's anthem is playing. So, guys, if you're at a hockey game, if you're at any game and the American national anthem is playing, don't boo that anthem. It's not going to do you guys any good. It's not going to do anything. You know who you guys should be mad at? You should be mad at the Liberal government, because that's who put us in these situations. Now, Dean, what do you think about the booing at these hockey games, man?
Yeah, I think that's like the least of our worries for sure. People are getting, you know, if they're not booing the anthem, they're going to boo the team. So I think that's probably the better move. You got to realize what's really happening here. You're getting turned against people who you had no problem with recently because of these things. And these things are happening. Why? Because your government is weak. And if we had a stronger government, these tariffs wouldn't happen. We would have more to push back on. Personally, I think these tariffs, they're obviously not about the drug problem or the border problem. That's not an issue between Canada and the U.S. It's like a fraction of a percent of all of the issues that they have coming from Canada. So that's not it. What it really is, I think he's trying to do a bit of a short squeeze, get the Canadian people riled up against the Liberal government, get them the fuck out of there so he can make some deals with the Conservatives, because he was really worried about the fact that we don't have any, or not worried, but he was saying a lot about, like, our businesses don't operate across the border.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things that are weird with our natural resources that we don't do. We're not developing our liquefied natural gas.
Yes.
We're not selling them. It's just a whole disaster what the Liberals have created with these natural resources that we have here. I mean, why the fuck do you think he wants us to be the 51st state? Because we have more natural resources than a lot of countries.
That's exactly right.
We're in like the top 5 for a lot of important resources.
Big time, man.
I think what he's really trying to do is rile up the Canadian people, and he's put, like, you know, calling him Governor Trudeau, 51st state.
It is funny.
It's funny, but it also pisses you off because you live here. If he was talking about Mexico, nobody here would give a flying shit about Governor fucking...
Specifically when he says Governor Trudeau, which is funny. Yeah, I agree, though. You're right.
I think he's riling us up so that we push out the current government so he can make deals with somebody new. He famously said he hated the finance minister. He hated Freeland. Like, he has tried to work with these people before, and he got nowhere because of the radical Liberals. So he's trying to squeeze them out, I think.
But you know what my concern is, which we'll probably talk about this when we talk about Mark Carney and the Liberal support, is... Man, the Liberal media in Canada is really is capitalizing on Trump's threats of tariffs and the 51st state.
Sure.
And they're trying to paint this picture that the big bad wolf Trump is going to manipulate and convince Pierre to play ball. And I don't know where they get this idea that Trudeau is a better negotiating partner with Trump than Pierre, but it's insane. But staying on Canadians' frustration with taxes, okay, guys, we're booing national anthems because of the possible 25% tax or the 51st state. Guys, you want to know who taxes you more than Trump? You want to know? Your own Liberal government. Justin Trudeau, that's who taxes you more than Donald Trump. The Liberal government taxes everybody it's way more than anybody could ever tax you guys, okay? Let's talk about some of these taxes, okay? Just to list a few. The CPP tax, the unemployment tax, the GST tax, the PST tax, the HST tax. Okay, we're talking about some provincial taxes in here too, but these are all the taxes. Property taxes, provincial and federal income tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, luxury tax, media tax, regulation tax, air travel tax, and of course, the carbon tax, the one that absolutely destroys us on every level that we can possibly think of when it comes to heating your home, when it comes to traveling in your car, when it comes to buying groceries, because those groceries come in a truck that need fuel, when it comes to absolutely anything. And the unbelievable, wild, crazy policies that we have in place in the name of climate initiatives is so fugazi and counterproductive on the grand scheme of things, because in the real world, guys, we have an abundant amount of resources, and the energy system is something that we can capitalize here in Canada. I think that Pierre Poilievre offers that. But let's talk about not Pierre Poilievre right now. We talked about that in the last whole episode. Let's talk about the Liberals. The Liberals and Mark Carney in particular. So following these tariff announcements and Trump concerns, like we just said, Canadian Liberals have tried to capitalize on the fear of Trump and the big bad wolf Trump. And they tried to do that through the new, polished, surface, refreshing leader of the Liberal Party, which is going to be Mark Carney, who was the former Bank of Governor of Canada. What was he, Dean? Do you remember?
Yeah.
So he's not necessarily was a...
he wasn't an elected official.
Politician, but many know that he actually supported a lot of the initiatives and efforts that Trudeau had in place, especially with the carbon efforts, which he claims now we're going to scrap the carbon tax, which ultimately is going to mean that, okay, on the forefront, we're going to get rid of this carbon tax that's not working, and then he's going to tax us even more when it comes down the line, guys. So please do not fall for this trick, because federal polling is showing us that the Liberal Party is just 7% behind the Conservatives. And in January of 2025, the Conservatives had a substantial 19-point lead with 46% support versus the Liberals' 27% support. So the gap has closed a bit. Dean, what is going on, and why are Canadians starting to consider voting for the Liberals again?
Yeah, I think the further that the Liberals position themselves away from Trudeau, and the more that they have some of the speaking points of the Conservative government kind of coming out of their mouths, like axing the carbon tax, all that kind of stuff, people are slowly forgetting about what just happened over the last 4 years, over the last fucking 10 years that we've had Trudeau and our economy and how it's gone to shit. So I think people can sometimes have short-term memory loss. They can forget about what just happened because you got a threat now, an external threat. It was the same way in the United States when 9/11 happened. Bush was one of the most hated presidents before that. He was sought as an idiot, a bumbling fucking Southern moron. And then 9/11 happens, and the entire country loved him, and he got reelected immediately, like a landslide.
They capitalized on catastrophes.
What's the saying? Never let a good disaster go to waste, or never let a good tragedy go to waste. That's kind of what they're doing now. They're using that to say, listen, we got to stop fooling around. I'm your guy. We're going to get this done. Trump's going to have to pay us, whatever they're saying. Like, it's just not, it's people just not thinking about what just happened, and they're just kind of going with their team. You know, there's a lot of people who are still reluctant to vote Conservative just because of the old adages. And I think they're capitalizing on that.
They're capitalizing on a bit. It's a little bit of cause for concern, but on the grand scheme of things, I think the Conservatives still hold a majority of support in Canada, just because Canadians are going to remember that things are just really bad right now, and that's a consequence of Liberal policies and Justin Trudeau. And you can't separate Mark Carney or any of these other candidates from Trudeau and from the Liberal Party. But they're getting some short-term success right now, possibly because our government is prorogued and we can't freaking discuss any policy or have any topics that we can discuss and come to some sort of solutions with, because the government is prorogued. So whatever media efforts that the either candidate does is the exposure that we're getting right now. But they're getting this sort of refreshing second win, the Liberals, right now. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when this federal election ultimately is established, the Conservatives will come on top. That's my optimistic, hopeful lens, because Canadians need to remember where we are and what has happened and why we are here, and the approach and the overspending and the taxation and the crime and safety and just the overall state of Canada, why we're here, why is this happening, what is going on. And it's a direct result of incompetence and weak leadership under Trudeau and the Liberals, aka Mark Carney next. Doesn't matter who it is. It's the same but different, because Mark Carney is a devil in a better suit, okay? So when it's time, use your power to vote. And it's a big election, and I think that we need to really consider about the next several years for Canada, because we need an overwhelming majority and we need change. So take a chance at change, because that's what we need. But just to kind of tie a bow on it, is there any final thoughts on any of these topics, Dean? Anything that we want to kind of discuss before we wrap it up here?
No, not really. I think we kind of went through a lot of it over the last hour. I think, it's same as usual. Use your common sense. Don't listen to the news media. Research your own stuff. Do some independent research and figure it out for yourself if Elon Musk is really a Nazi, or was he just giving an awkward salute, or what? Just to bring that up at the end here, do
he's
your own
autistic,
research.
man.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so fucking smart. He doesn't.
He was a massive supporter of Israel. You don't do that when you're a Nazi. It's just insane.
He was trying to say, "My heart goes out to you."
Yeah, he just did an awkward gesture.
Yeah,
it's just
that's the weirdest thing about the media, is they try to capitalize on this obvious stupid behavior mishaps that the average person that doesn't watch The View. Well, I watch The View because it's comedic, so maybe not me, including
to
me.
laugh. Yeah,
to laugh. The average person is going to look at that and be like, okay, that's not what he was doing. He's not low key. I'm a Nazi. Come on, dude. What the fuck? He's just he's an awkward guy. He's jumping and his belly's coming out and shit.
Exactly. He's a
it's
dork.
just what it is, man.
Yeah.
So, guys, on the final segment of Couple Casuals podcast, we call Salute. I'm going to give a salute to everybody here to just study our patience, to look in an optimistic lens, because that is the only way forward. We're going to reestablish our Canadian pride, and we're going to get back to common sense, as the Conservatives say. There's a lot of things happening with the cause for concern, with safety, with flights, with politics, with what's happening next. Are we getting tariffs? Are we not? Who's our leader? Who's not? We're in the middle right now. So just stay optimistic, stay positive, and all good things will come to us in Canada. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Dean, for the great insight. I appreciate all you guys. I love you, nobody else. Until next time. Ciao.